What's going on? Welcome to the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears, Arizona football beat writer, here with Micah Lev, senior writer and columnist, talking all things Arizona Wildcats football following Arizona's 34-7 loss to Colorado. Before we get things going, just want to remind you guys to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also check us out on Tucson.com and the Wildcast mobile app. Highly recommend a subscription to the Star because you can read Michael Lev's 5 takeaways following the game against Colorado. One of my favorite pieces that Lev has written all season long because, well, it's very honest. It's brutally honest, and it's also very fair. Lev, you did a fantastic job really kind of breaking down what we saw take place Saturday afternoon at Arizona Stadium, which was a complete letdown by the Arizona Wildcats in so many ways, right? Because going into this game, we talked about the offense and how they needed to protect Noah Fafita. The offense needs to find its identity again, but they're so close, right? They're getting to the plus territory. They're just not finishing drives. What we saw on Saturday was 2 ginormous steps back in the offense. 6 straight punts, 7 punts total for the day. They had just as many punts as they had points. They had more penalties than points in this game. And they did not do a good job of protecting Noah Fafita. As a matter of fact, I think it was actually worse than what we saw against BYU, which is very problematic because, while Colorado's defensive line is improving, getting to the quarterback isn't necessarily their hallmark. And Arizona gave up more sacks in one game than they had the entire season long. They did not protect Noah Fafita. The offense did not move the football. And the last time that they scored single digits in a home game was the game that got Kevin Sumlin fired, 70-7 in the Territorial Cup. And now here they are putting up 7 points against Colorado and getting just completely blown out once again by a really good Big 12 team. I don't want to diminish really what Colorado was able to do because I thought they had a lot of good stuff. I thought they had a great game plan. They executed everything for the most part, but my goodness, this Arizona team just seems so dispirited. And the team that has played with so much joy and so much fun over the last year and a half to 2 years, it doesn't look like they're having fun playing football, Lev.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because they are not a fun watch right now at all. When you're a struggling program, but like at least your offense is good and maybe the defense isn't so great, like it's at least watchable. It's entertaining. They're not that right now. It is difficult to watch that offense. We've talked about this before, but it just feels like everything is difficult for them on that side of the ball. And they've changed play callers. They've talked about different ways they can protect Noah Fafita, getting the ball, helping him, setting him up to get the ball out of his hand quicker. And whatever they're trying, it's not working. So I think they need to try something else, whatever that is. I don't think it means a quarterback change, but I think it means a philosophical change. Said more running the ball, maybe like simplifying the offense even further. Find ways to get the ball to T-Mac, which they couldn't even do that against Colorado, which was a problem. As you mentioned, like they had been at least moving the ball a little bit, getting to the scoring area. That didn't even happen against Colorado. I wrote in Cat Stats last week about how much better Noah Fafita had become in terms of avoiding sacks versus last year. He had no chance in this game. And in fact, the best offensive plays they had were his scrambles.
Yeah.
Which is like, to me, that's like a last resort. That's not something that's baked into the offense with Fafita as your quarterback. In fact, Khalil Tate's your quarterback. I mean, that's a different story, but that's not really Noah's game. Kudos to him for making some big runs and making people miss in space. But I mean, if that's what you're banking on, that's a problem. So yeah, this offense it's a mess. It's been a mess. And the disturbing part about it is that they haven't been able to fix it. Like it feels like that definition of insanity thing, right? Where, you keep doing the same thing over and over. It doesn't work and you just go right back to it. They've got to come up with some different looks. Someone actually brought this up. I don't know where I saw it, but remember in 2021, Jed Fish was pretty stubborn, about the kind of offense he wanted to run and what it would look like. But as the season progressed and they, all kinds of quarterback issues and didn't have that many good weapons, etc., he did make some adjustments. He went more to the shotgun. He incorporated the Wildcat formation. Remember with Jamari Joyner a little bit when he was healthy, they ran more RPOs. The staff needs to look at all of that type of thing and figure out how can we move the football to the point where at least we're like an average to above average offense. Yeah. Because the way things are now, they're not going to beat anybody. And that includes a vulnerable West Virginia team, a vulnerable Houston team coming up later on the home schedule.
In the looks to T-Mac, I know that T-Mac has been pretty much the offense this season, that connection between Noah Fifita and T-Mac. But, if that's your bread and butter, why not rely on that when Travis Hunter is not 100%? Right? Did T-Mac finish with 5 targets on the day?
5 targets. I mean, there was a 6th pass that was thrown to him. That was a pass interference down the field. But, yeah, we're used to him being in the 10 to 12 target range. Now, look, we've had this debate throughout the season. Like, are they throwing it to him too much? Are they not developing other guys? It's definitely a balance and a fine line. But you have to feed your guy. Like Dino Babers earlier in the year made some sort of analogy about Michael Jordan and 3-on-3 and who's going to take the shots. Like Michael Jordan needs to get his shots up. Tetsuo McMillan needs to get the ball in his hands. And I think the offense right now is so dysfunctional, in part because of offensive line issues, which is another topic we could maybe get to a little later, that they can't even do that. So, yeah, it's a problem. It's a major, major problem. And I think the sort of the unpleasant side effect for Noah Fifita is like he doesn't have the confidence that he had last year. I mean, it's pretty clear when you watch him play that he just isn't as confident a quarterback as he was, and you can't really blame him.
And I was actually thinking about this before this podcast. I don't think Noah has been really put in this position before where the team is struggling. Like when he was with the Orange County Buckeyes, they were a really good Pop Warner team. Then he goes and plays at Anaheim Servite. And while they did lose games in high school, they were still one of the better teams in California and a nationally ranked program. And then once, all those guys start playing at Arizona, they're winning football games. They're going to the Alamo Bowl and winning 10 games. And I think for the first time in Noah Fifita's career, he's kind of facing adversity. And he has done such a great job of being accountable and being a leader and falling on the sword and not, trying to blame anybody else, which we have seen. I mean, heck, the guy that he was playing up against, Shedeur Sanders, we've seen him in press conferences kind of throw his offensive line under the bus. Noah Fifita has every right to completely trash Arizona's offensive line because those guys have not done well. And even the players who are available, like Wendell Moe and Josh Baker, even Big Jonah, like those guys have kind of taken a step back a little bit in terms of protecting Noah. They're not giving Noah Fifita a chance. And right now, like going back to what I made, my point at the start of the podcast was they seem so dispirited. They seem like they have just completely lost their love for the game. And there's a lot of blame to go around. But man, these coaches, they got to do a better job of putting these guys in the best position to win. Brent Brennan has talked about like the guys who are available, we need to lean into their strengths and figure out a way to win. Well, are they doing that? Because it doesn't really seem like it. It seems like you said, Lev, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And the results aren't getting better. They're getting worse.
Yeah, of course, it's not fun when you lose, but it's really not fun when you lose and you score only 7 points. This is the second time this year that they've scored only 7 points. Even the Utah game, which they won, and Utah certainly hasn't looked very good lately. They've got their own offensive issues. Their offensive coordinator, Andy Ludwig, resigned last night from his post. I'm sure that was sort of a mutual type of decision. But even in that game, they only scored 2 touchdowns, right? Had 3 field goals. And then BYU, they had 19 points. So I think they had 2 touchdowns in that game. I think you ran through it the other night in the press box. They had 8 touchdowns in the opener and they haven't had more than 2 in a game since then. So yeah, it has an impact on everything else. Like Arizona's defense, shorthanded, ton of injuries. They're also playing from behind all the time because the offense isn't scoring. As a result of that, the other team's playbook is wide open, right? They can do whatever they want. Whereas because Arizona is behind all the time, when they're on offense, pass rushers just have a free run. They know Arizona's they've got to pass. We're going to blitz. We're going to rush the passer. We don't have to worry about the run. So it's impacting other aspects of the game as well, and just really making it difficult on the overall team operation.
And then you add in their defense being so banged up too.
So banged up. Oof.
Like Jacob Manu is the latest one on the injured reserve list. We don't know his status moving forward. Celebrating a play, freak accident, suffers a leg injury. And now you got Gunnar Maldonado out. Traden Stukes is out. Takario Davis missed the second half of the game against Colorado with a groin injury. Marquise Gross-Killebrew is also out right now. Like, the list goes on. And majority of these injuries are on the defensive side. And then the big injury on offense is at left tackle, because Rhino Tapatotai goes down. They put in Micah Wooten. And Lev, I'm not trying to hate on the kid or dogpile, but I just got to be honest, that in terms of Power 4, Power 5 football, that was one of the worst I've seen from an offensive lineman. Like it was so bad that Pro Football Focus didn't even give him a grade for his pass protection. He had 16 pass blocking snaps, and they just said 0.0 because of all the penalties, the pressures that he allowed on Noah Fafita. He allowed 4 pressures, 2 sacks, had a couple of false start penalties, had a holding penalty. Like, it was just not good. And Arizona resulted to Jonah Savinaya moving over to left tackle and putting Ryan Stewart and Michael Wooten at right tackle. Regardless, they have issues on the offensive line in protecting Noah Fafita, and it just does not look good. So injuries are really playing a big part. And is that strength and conditioning? Is that bad luck? Those are some things that Brent Brennan and his staff are evaluating right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part that the injuries are just luck turning around on them. I mean, they barely lost anybody to injury last year, and it does catch up to you sometimes. I mean, it is a violent sport by nature. A lot of these injuries are, they're ACLs and knee injuries. They're not soft tissue injuries. Takario's seemingly is some sort of a groin situation. They're also missing Kean Burnett on offense, which didn't help. But they have plenty of depth at tight end, and that's one of the questions that we'll get to here in a little bit in the mailbag. Michael Wooten just was overwhelmed. He wasn't ready for the big stage. He's a young player. Offensive line is a difficult position. For the most part, it takes several years to develop players at that position. I would be shocked if they put him out there again this upcoming week. I think Jonah's going to be at left tackle, and they're probably going to put the veteran Ryan Stewart over at right tackle and see how that goes as kind of your plan A, assuming that Rhino Tapatotai is unable to return. It's funny, Justin, like we've elevated Rhino to this sort of lofty status, like he's a reliable veteran. He's only a redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Like, he never played a snap before this season. But they lost Jordan Morgan, obviously, to the draft. And then Raymond Polito, 4-star recruit, he was supposed to be that guy. And, he had some things happen to him off the field that, prevented him from playing this year. And that's just had a huge domino effect on a lot of things. Like, I don't know, maybe it would have been a better idea to put Jonah at left tackle from the outset. But then you're asking a lot of him. Like, he started his career as a guard. They moved him out to right tackle. Now you're asking him to play a third position, which he's probably going to end up doing. I mean, that's not really fair to him. That affects your continuity, guys you're playing next to. So yeah, it's a huge problem. They had a 52.8% pressure rate against Colorado, which was the highest of the season. The previous high was 51.5% against Utah. You want that number to be around 20%, ideally. Maybe you could tolerate 30%, but over 50% pressure rate allowed is really bad. It is really difficult to function if that is the case. And if you know you have offensive line problems, you got to make some serious adjustments. Keep a tight end in to block. Use a running back to chip on the defensive end. Run the ball more to make things easier on the offensive line and create more manageable down and distance situations. Once again, their third down average to go, I think, was 8.8 yards in that game. In Colorado was 4.9. So you tell me which of those two is easier to convert.
Yep. All right, let's get into some of the mailbag questions that were sent over the last few days. I got plenty. Thank you guys, as always, for submitting your questions. This first one comes from Zona Cats 21. What % chance do you think Noah, Kean, etc. stick around next season? It's a really good question.
It really is.
And
I think, I think 0% chance that Tetsuo McMillan does, because
NFL,
he's going to be a first round draft pick. Jonas Sabanaya, also projected to be a first rounder, though he's kind of struggling a little bit this year. I think a lot of that has to do with like playing multiple positions. Not really fair to him. He projects as a guard, most likely on the next level. I would say less than 50-50 that he returns. He's a different kind of cat. Like, he might want to come back for another year. With Noah and Kean and some of these other offensive pieces, like, I think it depends on what changes are made on the offensive coaching staff. And they're going to have to make changes. I think there's no question about it. I think it's going to be a mandate from above, whether Brent Brennan wants to do it or not. I think he's going to have to completely re-examine that. And so who are those? Who do they bring in? And will that satisfy the Fafita camp, the Burnett camp? It's just this is an offense where this works for us. This is similar to what we were doing before, or this person's had great success elsewhere. I think those are the mitigating factors.
Yeah, I think there will be changes to the offensive staff. And if there aren't any changes to the offensive staff, then I think you could expect a lot of guys to enter the transfer portal. And that includes guys like Noah Fafita and Kean Burnett. And I know that, next year, Jed, they got Washington. At Washington, they have Damon Williams. So, I could easily say that, Noah Fafita is just going to transfer to Washington, and that'll be that. I mean, if he does enter the portal, he's probably not going to reunite with Jed Fish. Where does a guy like Noah Fafita go?
Yeah, I mean, his stock is not nearly as high as it was a year ago. It's kind of like, it's similar to sometimes, should I enter the draft? Should I not? Sometimes guys, like, if your stock is as high as it's ever going to be, go in the draft, right? If it's kind of, if you're kind of at a standstill, maybe it makes sense to come back for another year. Guys like Michael Penix and Bo Nix, they were able to raise their draft stock by coming back for another season and make some money through NIL. But Noah Fafita was a sought-after commodity after having an awesome season last year with, I think, a 25-6 touchdown to interception ratio, over 70% completions. Hasn't been that guy this year. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. Might very well be Arizona because, he's just that kind of guy.
All right. This next one comes from Joseph52. Says, it's been a while, but I understand 10 million is a huge ask to end a short contract, but week by week, it is seeming more and more affordable. What % chance do you give for Desiree Reed-Francois, who we call DRF, to come up with the money to stop the bleeding and start with a clean slate? It's really hard to imagine Brent Brennan being gone after this year, just because of, I think Arizona's paying 2 presidents at the moment, Robbins and the new president. Also, Dave Hickey's contract is still being paid. They also just, I think, paid $1.5 million for Desiree Reed-Francois to come over to Arizona. The Wildcats have a financial situation, and they've also been paying a lot of money for the people who are currently in place. Brent Brennan is one of the lowest paid coaches at the Power 4 level. And I think right now they're not going to fire Brent Brennan, even if they lose the remainder of the games on their schedule. I think that if they're going to make any changes, they're going to just do the offensive staff and hope that year 2 under Brent Brennan is much better. So I'll put close to 0 for firing Brent Brennan.
Yeah, I would say like 5%, maybe. Look, one of the reasons that Brent Brennan was appealing to me was that he was going to be a long-term solution here, like someone who you could see retiring at Arizona after like a 15-year run. You know, obviously he's off to a bad start, and he has to make up a lot of ground with the fans who've like really turned on him quickly. You know, they
Very
don't like
quickly.
they don't like that he wears a lei. They don't like that his sideline demeanor. They don't like that he doesn't, coach the offense or the defense. They don't like his answers and press. They just don't like anything right now, and that's probably because the team is losing a lot.
Well, and that's the thing, Lev, is like, the nice guy act was cool, right? For Arizona fans, they liked it. They seemed like, oh, this guy's a very genuine guy. He he cares about his job. But then you start losing, and people start to question that. Like, oh man,
what's going on over there?
I have no idea. Man, music at the radio station. But anyways, back to what I was saying. Kevin Sumlin, remember when he was first hired, they were like, man, look at how cool he is compared to the previous 2 guys who were such hotheads. He's such a cool-headed guy. And then they start losing, and the next thing you know, it's like, oh, he doesn't care.
Right.
So
yeah.
Let me get out of the station.
Yeah.
But
Justin's on the move here. Yeah. So, all of these things get magnified when you lose. But getting back to the question itself, like, I just don't see it as a realistic possibility to fire Brent Brennan after 1 year. Even if you're not happy with what's gone on, like, he does have a track record. He helped build up San Jose State. He's very well liked in the locker room. So what you do if you're Desiree Reed-Francois is you sit down after the season, like, these are the changes that we need to make, and like the offense just isn't working right now. We're going to have to make some changes on that side of the ball. So that's the mandate. I don't see Arizona coming up with $10+ million to fire Brent Brennan after 1 year. I don't think it would be good for the program either. I mean, one of the problems that this program has had that has sort of stood in the way of long-term success and sustaining that success, they've had so much turnover. I've been here since December of 2015, and we're on head coach number, how many was it? Head coach number 4 in like a 9-year span. You want to build something long-term. And I think Brent Brennan has shown that he can be a program builder. The problem is he inherited a team that was 10-3, and that team already has more losses than it had last season.
Lev, you got any questions over on your end?
I do.
The mailbag?
I do. All right. Let's start with Gozer. Gozer's got 2 questions. Okay. What are fans' expectations for teams going through coaching transitions, scheme changes, coaching and coaching styles, returning players, and those not returning all contribute to a change from the previous season? Did fans misread these effects on Arizona's team? I would say yes and no. I think the misread came in sort of maybe underestimating the impact of the guys that they have lost, right? They lost first-round tackle Jacob Cowing, who's making plays for the 49ers in their game yesterday, Tanner McLaughlin, Michael Wiley, like a lot of really productive veteran offensive players. Those guys have been hard to replace. They lost a bunch of defensive linemen as well. And it was hard to replace all those guys because when they went shopping in the portal, the shelves were maybe half full or less. Whereas if all of this had happened, in the beginning of December, as opposed to mid-January, you'd have the whole portal is open. Everyone's in there, more good players to choose from. So I think that part we did underestimate, but they also retained a lot of good players. Like, they kept the core of the team intact. And really, that should have been enough for them to be in a better position than they're in now.
Yeah, I think that losing Jordan Morgan, who is the first Arizona offensive lineman to go in the first round since 1992, like that's a pretty significant loss, right? Losing all those guys on the defensive line has been a pretty significant loss. But I would say that Arizona's defensive line has performed better since their first game, right? It seems like week by week, like that side of the ball has gotten a little bit better. They're at least trending in the right direction. The offense, to me, really has no excuse. I think that they have been healthy for the most part, and yet they just seem to take steps back week by week. And I think that, yes, Jacob Cowing, Tanner McLaughlin, Jordan Morgan, all the defensive linemen that we mentioned, I mean, those are pretty big losses, but the nucleus all stayed. The quarterback, the star wide receiver, the big offensive lineman in Jonas Savianaya, the pretty much the guts of the defense that Dwayne Aquino always calls, right, with the defensive backs. All those guys decided to come back, and after going 10-3 with a majority of those starters all returning, you felt good about Arizona and where they stood as a program. And then I guess this was probably a product of conference realignment, and we don't really know exactly how all these teams fit together. But we're thinking about Arizona and their successful season last year going into what we thought, hey, a wide open Big 12, right? You don't got Oklahoma, you don't got Texas, you don't have the heavy hitters. The lane is right there for Arizona to potentially win the college football, or to potentially win the Big 12. And if you do that, you get a bid into the 12-team CFP. Like, that was conceivable for this Arizona team to happen, and now it's just completely fallen off the rails.
Yeah, good segue into Gozer's second question, which is, how did the media and fans misread the Big 12 teams versus their performance through the first half of the season? What did we assume and what did we miss? For example, BYU picked to finish near the bottom of the conference. They're at the top. Oklahoma State picked to finish at the top of the conference. They're near the bottom. ASU's done pretty well. Cincinnati's done pretty well. These are, again, teams that were picked to finish near the bottom. They're near the top. Arizona, vice versa, Kansas. These teams are struggling. I think the biggest thing is that there's so much turnover in college football now with the transfer portal that it's you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
like, you do not know how the pieces are going to come together. Like, look at Indiana. Indiana's on the fringe of the top 10 in football, right? And people didn't see that coming. Maybe they should have, because Kurt Cignetti is a good coach, and he was able to bring a lot of his really good players from James Madison over there. But I just think there's a very high, like, unpredictability factor in the sport as a whole that makes it difficult to slot these teams until they actually get out there on the field, and you can see what they're all about.
And the Big 12 is kind of drunk in some ways, because I mean, these teams that were voted to finish towards the bottom, they're all thriving at the top. Teams like BYU, Texas Tech, heck, even ASU. I know that they lost this past weekend, but ASU's having a much better season than we all predicted, and they were voted 16th in the entire conference. So it's been very fun.
This question comes from John. What exactly is going on with the play calling issues? Are these Adkins plays / design, or is he being forced to work with the playbook Dino designed, and then Adkins will redesign a new offense next year when he has more time? I will admit, we don't know the answer to this question. It is a question we can try to ask in a press conference setting. I'm not sure we're going to get an honest answer about it. I feel like the way they described the process of putting this offense together, that it was kind of an amalgam. It was like maybe a little bit of the old playbook. It was a little bit of Dino's playbook. It's a little bit of what they brought over from San Jose State. But once they've kind of put it all together, it's like, it's kind of Frankenstein's monster. Like, it just hasn't worked. It hasn't clicked. There's no consistency or continuity to it. There's no kind of singular sense of purpose of what they're trying to do. And I think that's one of the issues that they really have to examine in the offseason. Like, what kind of team do we want to be? And then let's try to be that team, instead of like maybe trying to kind of be too many things or do too many things, which it feels like is the case right now, and they're not really succeeding at any of those things.
But that's so bizarre or so unfortunate for Arizona because, you had an opportunity to really capitalize on year one and kind of develop your identity and show the rest of these recruits and, guys that you're looking after. This is our identity. When you come to Arizona, this is how you're going to play. If you're an offensive player, like if you're a wide receiver right now and you're looking at Arizona, you're like, why would I want to come there? Your best player is getting the ball, is getting targeted 5 times in a single game. Why the hell would I want to come to Arizona and be a part of that? Arizona's offensive staff is failing to capitalize on the firepower that they have, and they could show what the potential of this playbook and offense can be, but they're not doing that. So what are you going to do moving forward? And also, weren't you guys supposed to find all this in summer, in training camp, in spring ball? Like, this was supposed to be the marriage of what worked with the previous staff and what has worked under San Jose State. And it showed that it worked in game one against New Mexico. Like, they had 61 points. T-Mac had a single game receiving record. What happened after that point? That's, to me, one of the more confusing things I've ever seen with Arizona football.
All right, Wildcat Dave AZ has 2 questions. We'll handle one at a time here. Why haven't we seen more of Powell and Miranda at tight end? We did see a lot of Roberto Miranda this past week because Kean Burnett was out. If Kean Burnett remains out, we will see more of those other guys. I don't really understand why they haven't given Tyler Powell a little bit more run. He produced in the one game that he did play. They rotated a lot of other spots. I don't see why they couldn't rotate at tight end as well.
Yeah, I think they need to bring in some more of those tight ends. And, whether it's used as blockers or even, hey, offensive line not producing, right? The defensive line is coming in and pressuring Noah. Wouldn't you want those guys available for quick routes so Noah can get the ball out of his hands? That's a good question because, honestly, I know that Kean Burnett has been banged up, but you would like to see some of these other guys get more involved, especially in the passing game. And heck, Roberto Miranda, when we were looking at him in spring and in the training camp, we were like, man, he has not gotten the ball a lot in his time at Arizona. This could be a breakout year for Das Gronk. And honestly, Lev, I don't even know, has Roberto Miranda even caught a pass this year?
Not that I can recall, but he showed the ability to do that in camp.
Yeah.
Several times. Made a lot of, we were all kind of surprised. Hey, this guy actually has some ball skills.
Yeah.
All right. Second question from Wildcat Dave AZ. You all had mentioned about how difficult it is to keep fans engaged in Tucson. Do you think that having less brand names in the Big 12 will have a negative impact on fan engagement? I think maybe a little bit. You don't have USC or Oregon coming in here. UCLA, from LA to Tucson, it's pretty easy to travel to get here. The old Big 12 had Texas and Oklahoma. It doesn't have that anymore. I'm not really sure who's the marquee program. Like right now, it's probably Colorado because they have Dion, but he might not last. He might not be here as early as next year. If you're reading the tea leaves on that one, so I think it's possible. But the bottom line is, if you win consistently and put an entertaining product on the field, then people will show up. And if you don't, they won't. So that's how I look at that.
So is he saying that if Texas Tech comes into town, that not many people are excited to go to the game?
Yeah, I think so.
As opposed to USC. I understand that, but I feel like more teams more fans from visiting teams have shown up to Arizona Stadium than we've seen in the last couple of years in Pac-12 play. Right? I mean, how many of those Colorado fans were there for Colorado or just people to support Dion? I don't know, but there were a lot of Colorado people there. I feel like Kansas State, when they come to Tucson, Arizona, they're going to bring a lot more people. I think people just need to get used to the teams that they have. And look at the Big 12 standings right now. You got Iowa State, you have BYU, you have all these teams that are close to the top. Like, you better get used to these brands now because they're going to come to Tucson and they're going to bring a lot of fans. And I think people need to start showing out. But we talked about this on Spears and Ali a lot, that Arizona also needs to do a better job of making the game more of a festival, right? Make it more an attraction, because, Tucson, while it is a small city, there's still plenty of things to do in Tucson. And rather than just going to a stadium, sitting on a bench and watching Arizona put up 7 points in a game, people would rather just go do something else. Make it attractive. Give them a concert. Give them a game day tradition. Like, I've been on the road this season, and Kansas State, BYU, Utah, like those crowds, those atmospheres, it's not even close. It's so much better than Arizona. And people want to talk about the late kickoff times. Well, that game against Utah kicked off at 8:15 in Salt Lake City, and that stadium was packed. So I think Arizona fans need to do a better job of showing up, but I also think that Arizona athletics, man, they really need to do something to make Arizona home games more of an experience.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-way street. And we have a sweet spot kickoff time coming up of 4:00, which is this time of year is great. I mean, the most of the stadium will be in shadows by that point. And the weather should be a little bit warmer than it was last. It should be really nice. So really no excuses from a game time standpoint. The one thing I'll say, just to finish up this topic, is I don't look so much at like what the attendance figure is or what the crowd looks like at the start of the game. I look at what does it look like about halfway through the third quarter?
Yeah.
Who sticks around? And you got to give them a reason to stick around, whether that's the stadium experience or the product on the field. And I think both of those things have been lacking. Okay, I got two more here, although one of them is kind of a multi-part thing. These are both from Carl Hansen. Was A.D. Hickey too quick in finding a replacement? They were already behind the sticks for finding players in the portal. What was the rush, if any? Well, let's go back to mid-January and remember like what was going on in college football at that time. Nick Saban left Alabama. He retired. They hired Kalen DeBoer from Washington. So Washington job opens up. Washington hired Jed Fish from Arizona. When you hire a new coach, or when you lose your coach, I should say, transfer portal window opens for your school for 30 days. That means anyone can leave. And the reason that they needed to hire a coach fast is that they risked losing almost the entire roster. Like, there was a realistic scenario where Jed Fish could have taken just about everybody with him up to Seattle. So that's why Dave Hickey had to act fast. He obviously had already vetted Brent Brennan from the previous coaching cycle. So it was kind of a no-brainer. And look, I will readily admit, I thought it was a great hire. Like, it seemed like an absolutely perfect fit in every way. It definitely has not worked out that way so far. But I think at least on paper, it made a lot of sense. And I don't think that Dave Hickey acted rationally or made the move too fast.
Well, and you also looked at Brent Brennan and what he was able to do at San Jose State, and people are always going to look at the records. And I'm like, at a program like San Jose State, you really have to comb through all the details more than just the record. And Brent Brennan had a good culture at San Jose State. He was also a really good fundraiser too. He brought in money to change up their facilities and upgrade it a little bit, have better meals for their players. Like, Brent Brennan did a solid job at San Jose State. And it's like, if he can do that at San Jose State, imagine what he could do with a place that's got better resources. I know that Arizona is not Texas or Alabama or the Georgia of the world, but in comparison to San Jose State, Arizona is more luxurious and has more resources to compete at the highest level of college football. And so, listen, I thought Brent Brennan could still be a home run hire for Arizona, right? I think really the issues right now with this team are the guys that he has under him. And it would not surprise me if we saw 1, 2, 3 offensive coaches either step away or get fired after this year. I think the offensive issues is all mostly with the offensive staff beyond just Brent Brennan, but I think that Brent Brennan can still be the guy at Arizona. But going back to the question, I think that they had to make a move because, like you said, if you went a week where Noah Fafita and T-Mac are like, I don't know who our head coach is. We don't know who our guy is. We got to make a decision very quick. And so to stop the bleeding and to prevent everyone from jumping ship, Arizona had to bring in a guy. And Brent Brennan, even though he was hired, there's still the possibility of these guys all leaving. And in just a couple of days of Brent Brennan being on the job, he was able to convince the two faces of the franchise, Noah Fafita and T-Mac, to stay. It just hasn't worked out the way that a lot of people thought it was going to go.
All right. The second question from Carl Hansen, and the last one we've got here. For those select players earning NIL, are the expectations from the coaching staff too forgiving at the expense of those players who don't receive any NIL money? Is Brennan too easygoing for his own good? Maybe it's time to send a message. This is an interesting question, whether there's sort of a double standard for like the NIL guys versus the non-NIL guys. I think I brought this up to you before. Justin, Jimmy Johnson, interviewed him way back in the day. And he told me, like, I coach every player differently because they're all different people, right? Like, you can't coach, Troy Aikman the same as you coach like the second string, defensive tackle, right? I don't know if that's the case in college. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Obviously, Noah Fafita, Tetero McMillan, these kind of guys are kind of in a different status. I mean, they have NIL deal with like a private jet company, they're in commercials, this sort of thing. The question about, is Brennan too easygoing? I mean, that is definitely the vibe that he puts off, right? He's California cool. He's laid back. He's not going to yell and be in your face. That doesn't mean that he doesn't care, right? That doesn't mean that he's not competitive. Like Pete Carroll was kind of like that too, but he was ultra competitive. Like competition was was always the kind of the bedrock of his program. Maybe that's something that Brent needs to play up a little bit. It's the competitive aspect of things. But right now, when you have so many injuries, it's kind of hard to do that. It's kind of hard to threaten people with the loss of playing time when maybe you're the only viable person they have at a given position.
Yeah, and there are also some cases where guys are raking in a bunch of NIL money and they just don't play, right? Like the backup kicker, Cash Peterman. He's got a large social media following. He's got NIL deals up the yin-yang, but he also does not play. Justin Flo has a bunch of NIL deals, but he also does not play. I don't think NIL deals or anything like that has something to do with playing time, but like sending a message in what way? Is he talking about like benching Noah Fafita? Like what is the message that our guest is referring to?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you can send a message, like if someone commits a bunch of dumb penalty, putting him on the bench for a little while, or maybe they don't get to start the next game or something. But like I said, they're in a bind right now because
I don't think
they don't have a lot of bodies.
Like they don't have depth to do something like that.
Yeah, so they're really in a tough spot right now. This team really has to dig deep and find something to eke out a win against West Virginia and kind of get things back on track here, just so everyone can kind of feel better about things. Because man, everyone right now, inside and outside the program, it feels like they're down in the dumps. I know that Noah Fafita was trying to put a happy face on the situation after the game, but I have to imagine that he's also really frustrated right now and questioning a lot of things. So that's not a great place to be. A little quick news item for those who aren't aware. They released the game time for the space game at UCF. That will be at 12:30 our time in Arizona, 3:30 Eastern. Not quite at the point where we're shifting to standard time yet. So it's still a 3-hour difference between us and the East Coast. So yet another early start.
How about
Justin,
that?
what have we done to deserve this?
Going to the Big 12. That's what it is, baby. No more Pac-12 after dark. We got Big 12 after brunch.
Yeah, that Houston game, though, that Friday night game, I think it's an 8:15 kickoff. So,
oh, boy.
Race. Good time. That'll be. Oh, man. Wonder what the crowd will be like for that one if they're like 3-6 at that point.
Oh, man. Not good.
Not good.
Not good at all. All right. We'll have another podcast later on in the week previewing the Arizona-West Virginia game, a.k.a. the Rich Rod Bowl. Lev's got a story on Rhett Rod, the former Arizona Wildcats quarterback, who's now a coach at Jacksonville State under Papa Rich. So that's going to be a great story. I can't wait for Lev to release that. Check out that story. Also check out all of our coverage of Arizona football on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster mobile app.